Thanks everyone for being here. I do want to say we are going to record this and we'll send out the recording post webinar. Closed captions are available. You can do that through Zoom. And if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat. I also want to introduce Will Simpson, who's our federal policy fellow this year. So if you have any questions in the chat, he may be able to help you with that. And did I get everything well?
Yep, that's perfect.
All right, great. So thanks everyone. Even with the government shutdown, things can still be busy in Washington. I'm going to change up the agenda today. Usually I talk a little bit about the policy that's going on and then end with how you can help. I'm going to start a little more with the how you can help part because, you know, we've had some crazy news this week on BikePed, and this is a time where we really need the community to come together and to take action. So I just wanted to really emphasize that. And then today I'm going to use the rest of the time talking about safety concerns that are being debated in the transportation reauthorization process. Please mute yourself if you are not already muted. Thanks. So obviously 2026 is going to be a big year. This webinar is part of a series I'm going to do leading up to the National Bike Summit. We are expecting Congress to come out with a 5-year transportation bill. At this point, we think we'll see a draft next spring. We'll see it before the summit. So the summit will be our opportunity to really respond while it's still in play. We also have not seen a lot. We've seen some very negative actions from the DOT in regards to canceling biking and walking grants and things like that. So yeah, so would love to see you be part of the summit. A lot of great speakers, a lot of great sessions, rides, discussions. It's a great time. We hope you can come. But I am particularly interested in getting as many people as possible to Lobby Day. We even have an option this year that you can just pay to come for Lobby Day and be part of that. This is really our opportunity to show the breadth and the depth of the biking movement and to let Congress see that. So, what makes this such an important week and why many of you may have joined today is that we saw a quote from Chairman Graves. Chairman Sam Graves is chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. He's known for working bipartisan. He has been good for us in the past. And yet he made a quote this week on Tuesday saying that in his reauthorization bill, we're not going to be spending money on murals, train stations, or walking paths or biking paths. And so that is a real concern. It's especially a concern given that Graves was, you know, when we were thinking about who wanted to be chair of transportation, I was sort of hoping it would be Graves. And this is what we're getting. So what does that mean for this? I've been talking to folks today about what they think it means. I also read your questions. There were a lot of questions about what is this going to mean for cities that want to build biking and walking and those sorts of things. What is it going to mean for transportation alternatives? My understanding right now is that that quote may have been focused on discretionary grant programs. So Safe Streets for All, the Build program, reconnecting communities, that sort of thing. At this point, it's not clear that he was talking about the formula program that runs through the state DOTs. So, you know, what does it mean for transportation alternatives, congestion mitigation, air quality, or CMAQ, highway safety program? I'm not sure. I don't think this news is as bad for those sort of bread and butter programs. However, it's never good, right? When someone says they're not going to fund biking and walking. And I do think we have to really turn up the volume on the benefits of these programs and the need for those programs and showing the support for those programs. All right, so how do we respond? And I'm talking to you 2 days after. So this is our first piece, and it's a little bit of this is going to sound like, oh, that's just more of the same. It is, but it's also critically important. These are things we've seen work in the past, and that's why we keep asking you to do some of these things. So first, we have an action alert up. We'll be sending that out. We would love for you to not only respond, but send it to people you know. If you have, if you're with an organization, please send it out on your listserv. If you're part of a bike club, maybe send it to other members of the club and be like, hey, this is getting serious. They're talking about pulling back on funding for biking and walking. Right? I do want to say we did one of these back in September when the Secretary of Transportation was asking for comments. And as a result of all the comments people put into the USDOT about what they want to see on reauthorization, 75% of those responses were pro biking, walking transit. And that's great news. It doesn't mean that the DOT is going to change their position on a dime, but at least they know that we're paying attention and that people care enough to reach out. Usually by this point, the administration would have put out a report on, okay, we put out this request for information. This is what we got back. We haven't seen that. And we might not see it in part because of the responses that you all gave. And so we've got to do as much as we can on those sorts of things. Another thing I would really suggest, especially if the government shutdown goes on for another week or two, consider, reaching out to the district office. Calling isn't, I know a lot of people would prefer to email versus call. That's great. Do the action alert. But calling makes a difference. A lot of people don't think about those district offices. And so if they get 8 calls, there's some research on this. It becomes kind of like, ooh, this is a crisis. We need to respond to this. There's something going on here. So if you can get, 8 people in your club, in your organization, in your friend group to call the office and say, hey, we really care about biking and walking. We're really worried about this. That matters. An even bigger step is to set up a meeting in that district office, right? A lot of them are at home right now. And so they should be there. They're always at home on Fridays. They're going to be home the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Thanksgiving. And they're also going to be home Fridays and these days in December. So we'd love for you to come to the summit. But reaching out this month, the next month is also really important and can help make a difference and get the issue on their radar. A lot of this lobbying and work that we do, we want to respond when the bill comes out, but we can actually have more impact now before they publish the bill. So reaching out now is critical. We'll share these slides after, but here's just a short script. If you want to get some folks to call, my member of Congress is Norton. So just say I'm a constituent of Representative Norton, and I'm reaching out about the Transportation Reauthorization Bill. I want to make sure it funds biking and walking projects that improve safety, connectivity, however you want to say it. Talk about something in your district. I could say, hey, Pennsylvania Avenue, they did all this work on it that slowed the speeds and made it easier to cross the street, and that's made a big difference. And I want to make sure that there's going to be more projects like that. Or maybe your community got a Safe Streets for All program and there's been a demonstration project on the street you want to talk about. Or maybe there's just a really dangerous intersection. Or maybe your community got a grant for a biking and walking project that's been pulled. You know, you can talk to them about that, but something that shows that benefit to your community. Maybe you can get a small businessman to call, or a businesswoman to call, or go to an office and talk about, like, hey, a lot of my traffic is people walking by, and we want to make sure that it's safe for them to do so. Any of those kinds of local comments, then ask the question, does the representative support funding for biking and walking and the transportation reauthorization bill? If you're calling, whoever you get on the phone is not going to have that answer. They're going to say, well, you know, I'll bring your concern to the member of Congress. That's when you want to ask, when will you be able to get back to me with an answer? Or when can I call back and get that answer? But seriously, if there's one thing you can do in the next few weeks, get 8 calls to a district office when you're a member of Congress. And if you're thinking, like I hear this lots of times, I'll hear, oh, but my member always votes with us, it's not that important. Or my member always votes against us, it's not worth reaching out to them. Back in 2015, when Congress was deciding the FAST Act, we really needed to protect transportation alternatives. It was a new program. There were a lot of members who wanted to get rid of it. So we did 2 things. One, the ranking Democrat at the time, Peter DeFazio from Oregon, he was great. He was our friend, but what we did was we organized every other Democrat on that committee to write him a letter saying transportation alternatives is important. Don't let them cut it. And, you know, DeFazio's folks might say we tied his hands a little bit on that because he wanted a little negotiating, but we were able to do it. But in order to do that, we really needed to have a grassroots effort, even on people who agreed with us, to get them to take that step and sign a letter. So that's why, even if your member agrees with us, it's really important to strengthen that. Right now, a lot of members are being asked to do a lot of different things, right? So getting the folks that agree with us to take that extra step is really going to matter. On the other side, this is a picture of EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. He was in Congress back in 2015. He was a Republican. He was a freshman member, but he's from Long Island. And he didn't want to sign on to anything. He didn't want to go sort of against the grain. There's a lot of Republicans, the Republican push to get rid of biking and walking funding. But he did, in our conversations with his staff, they were able to say, yeah, this is important to our district. We do have a lot of trails. We can say something behind the scenes. So even though he's MAGA now, right? He's in the administration. He was very Tea Party at the time. He was still willing to help out behind the scenes, but it really mattered that we were able to get people in his district talking to him about these trails. Hey, Bart, can you mute yourself, please? Thanks. All right. Longer term, some things you can do is the Show Congress event. Invite your member of Congress to a bike event. This is a screenshot from a video, and I know our comms person is going to kill me for this fuzzy picture, but this was a Show Congress event for the first protected bike lane in South Carolina. Cola Town is Columbia, and, you know, they reached out. They thought they were going to get a member of Congress. He canceled that day, but they still knew about it. And so inviting them to an event, it's a way to let them know about it. It's a way that you can then follow up with any media you get, any feedback you get, any pictures, you know, showing a crowd. Hey, we got a huge crowd. Sorry you missed it. That kind of stuff matters. The other thing I'm going to suggest is keep in touch. Let them know what's going on. You know, if you're in the public sector and you're like, well, I can't lobby, I work for a city, I work for a local government, you don't have to lobby. But just when you're doing updates, this is Arlington, Virginia's giving an update on the Columbia Pike Bike Boulevard. Anytime you do that, send that to your Congress member's office. When I'm going around to offices, I often will hear, well, we haven't heard about this from our city. So if you're working on biking and walking in the city, if you're a consultant, if there's a way that you can just give them an update. Don't lobby, just say like, hey, this is happening. This is the kind of response we're getting on it. We think it's really important. That will be in their minds when they hear about funding and the possibility of cutting funding for something like this. If you're an organization, send them a story once a month. Like, you don't want to be contacting the staffer every week. That's a little much. But once a month, if they can hear from you, even if they don't open the email, they'll see the subject line and know like, oh yeah, there's a bike interest in my district, and that's important. And we need all of these little pieces more than ever right now. Longer term for us, we're thinking about a couple things. One is economic benefits of biking and walking, and the other is safety. This is because one of the arguments we're getting hit with a lot is, well, this isn't in the federal interest. It's what the US Department of Transportation is saying as well. Like, this is a federal program. It's within the federal interest. These things are local. If you're from a large metropolitan planning organization, area, transportation management area, something like 2/3 of the gas tax is collected in those metro areas, right? So I think there's an argument that those funding should also be going back, or at least a portion of those need to go back to the things that are important for those urban areas. And those urban areas care about biking and walking. Rural areas also care, and they care a lot about that economic development and benefits side. One of the sessions we'll have at the summit will be on the economic benefits. I want to highlight this study done by the Iowa Bicycle Coalition because they got down to the county level about what those benefits are. I think it's going to be a really great session. We also have the Kansas DOT. And I think, you know, so we're looking for that data. We want to have that data to share with members of Congress. If you know of a report in your state or you have a local report, please send it to Will, because we want to try to gather that information for the summit. So this is one of the arguments we're making, because local economies affect the federal economy, and we know how important the economy is, to voters, to everyone, members of Congress. We're also, obviously, we've always talked a lot about safety, and that's another point that we do a lot on, talk a lot on. So, yeah, so I'm going to go on and talk about some certain safety concerns that we're hearing about in the bill. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. So again, what we heard from Graves, what I'm hearing today is that that quote was mostly about discretionary funds. So just a quick reminder, transportation goes in two buckets. Roughly 90% of that goes to the states through specific programs like Transportation Alternatives, CMAQ, et cetera. The discretionary programs are those where a local government or a state applies directly to the US DOT, and that's about 10%. It's the competitive process. Congress sets the criteria, but US DOT has a lot of flexibility on what they do. And we have traditionally, sustainable transportation advocates have wanted more of this because it makes it competitive. We think it may end up with better projects. So I want to talk about, if this is what Graves is targeting, it's not great. I mean, we do know that, like, right now we're not seeing a lot of biking and walking projects getting through the Trump administration. Will has an update on the Safe Streets for All grants that he'll put in the chat on, you know, there's been some that have been put on hold right now. I know a lot of you who may work on these, you may have gotten requests from the DOT to change certain pieces of it. I was talking to someone from a city recently who got a letter saying, you can confirm that your Safe Streets for All grant will not result in a lack of capacity, of lane capacity, right? So road diets, biking and walking, those things that make us safer are at risk. So these are important projects to us. It also makes it harder, like, if we don't know what Graves means by his statement. Is he saying that he's going to make these projects ineligible? That could really hurt us, right? Because then how can we build complete streets projects with those grants? You can't. How can you do a reconnecting communities project with that grant? All of those things would be a problem, and it's also a problem because this bill, right? If it passes in 26, it's going to have it's going to overlap with the Trump administration for half of it, and for half of it be in the next administration. And we don't want this bill to tie the risks of the next administration. We want them to be able to fund biking and walking. We also have been hearing that they're looking at limiting eligibilities for programs. So we don't want them to do that in discretionary and have that bleed over into the other programs. This is a place where we want to give state DOTs, local governments flexibility. And the one thing I'll say is that this year, when they were working on the budget, Congress put in report language that was like, hey, don't forget that BUILD program, biking and walking is eligible for it. So we definitely have leaders in Congress that want to keep it open. We just got to make sure to fight so that it stays at the top of their list. Another reason why these programs are so important, you're probably I'm probably preaching to a choir, right? You've seen those Safe Streets for All grants, but just looking at that Tiger Build Raise, we did great in that, and we're looking at going back to a year where there's just going to be those dollars maybe off the table. For the Trump administration, we want to make sure those eligibilities remain for future administrations. The next one I want to talk about is the Vulnerable Road User Special Rule. This is a rule that says that if 15% or more of your overall roadway fatalities are bicyclists and pedestrians or vulnerable road users, then you have to spend 15% on vulnerable road user safety. So this map shows in red, they're the states that qualify for next year. And then those pink states are states where their percent was between 12 and 15. So some of those states, Ohio, Indiana, Mississippi, New Hampshire, have all sort of gone in and out. And then there's a couple other states like that they're creeping up, like Idaho's on that list now. Kansas is on that list. They've increased. So this is something that's worked really well for us. It's been roughly $500 million a year on new spending on biking and walking safety. It also came hand in hand with the VRU assessment. So all the states have done the data to figure out where their high injury networks are and hopefully use this funding to fund those. We're also hearing a little bit of pushback from AASHTO, from state DOTs, that this is necessary. So this is one of those places where we're going to be playing defense. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is the 402, 405 safety programs. So what we were just talking about with the VRU special rule, that's on the highway safety program under federal highways. That's infrastructure funding. So that was 15% or more of their infrastructure safety funds have to go to biking and walking. 402, 405 safety programs are that behavior change. So that's education, it's enforcement, it's PSAs, things like that. So under 402, every state gets a chunk of funding, and they can figure out their emphasis areas and spend it on that. 405 lists out specific priority areas, and then it's only states that qualify. So there's a motorcycle safety, there's an occupant car safety, which is like kids' car safety seats. There's an impaired safety, although every state qualifies for that. There's also a biking and walking. 405G is a non-motorized safety, and that can go to education for law enforcement and the public. It can also go to demonstration projects. And the cutoff for that is the same as the HSIP. It's if 15% or more of your roadway fatalities are bicyclists and pedestrians. So I'm just going to go back. So, so the map would look like this, where the red states would all qualify and have to spend some money on biking and walking education. The blue states and the pink states, no. So if you get 402 or 405 funding, you know that it can be difficult to administer. Every state is different, but it can be difficult. And the states really don't like 405 because there's these tiny buckets of funding that have to be used for a specific purpose. The governor highways, and I also failed to mention 402 and 405 funding runs through the Governor Highway Safety Office, which in some states is embedded in their DOT, in some states it's in the governor's office, in some states it's someplace else. But their association, their AASHTO, if you will, is the Governor's Highway Safety Administration. So they've been floating a proposal on the Hill that would combine those programs, including all of those eligible uses. They would maintain a set aside for all those priority areas, but they want to change the qualifying criteria to just affect states that have above average fatalities. So I'm going to show you that same map. So they would say it would only be for states that are over the national average in biking and walking fatalities and vulnerable road user fatalities. So under this new criteria, only the red states would qualify. And all of those pink states are states that would qualify now, but would drop out. The light blue are those states that are sort of on the edge, don't qualify now, but are on the edge. And then those blue states are below 12, so still don't qualify. So this is a problem. There's some benefits to their proposal because it might make some of the administration easier, but we would lose 13 states out of the 31 in DC that are required to spend money on that behavior change, education, demonstration projects, or enforcement. So this is something we're pushing back on. You know, we're open to talk about what might work, but I am really worried about it. I'm worried for two reasons. I want all those pink states to be investing in biking education, but I also don't want this new criteria to be moved to the highway safety program. That's one thing we're looking at. All right. Another place that we're seeing some conflict, this is in the car safety standards. You know, our goals are last time we got pedestrian automatic emergency braking, that hasn't been on my list before, but given the pushback, just protecting that is now on our list. We want to create a new required safety standard for bicyclists and motorcyclists automatic emergency braking. The way AEB, automatic emergency braking, works is it's the same technology, but it has to be tuned differently to different users. And so we want to make sure that as standard, When you buy a car, you get it for vehicle to vehicle, you get it for pedestrian, and you get it for bicyclists and motorcyclists. The other thing we've been talking about for a long time is we want an autonomous vehicle vision test. We want something that autonomous vehicles have to prove that they can detect and respond to people biking and walking. We also, there's a lot of other things we support, speed camera eligibility. I live in DC. One of the things that this administration does is it attacks things in DC first and then goes further. So Congress is and this is actually Congress, they're pushing back on DC's ability to stop right on reds and to stop our ability to use speed cameras or red light cameras. If they do it here, they're going to do it everywhere eventually. And we are seeing some laws, some bills that would push that. We also support Mothers Against Drunk Driving on their HALT Act, which would create a DUI response in your car, and also intelligent speed assist. So those are some of the other things that we've been looking at. It's getting harder and harder to push for those car safety standards, in part because we have a new senator, Senator Bernie Moreno, who's from Ohio. He used to be a car dealer owner, dealership owner. And his argument is that when you add all of these new safety standards, it's going to make the cars more expensive. And that will result in Americans continuing to drive their older, less safe cars. Generally, right now, if you want those higher safety standards, you have to agree to pay more. So you buy a package of things like automatic emergency braking, the thing that tells you if you veer out of the lane, blind spot detection, all of those things. And they're only available in this, if you pay an additional $10,000. Yeah, and that's been hard, right? A lot of people don't do that because it's really hard to imagine yourself killing someone with your car, right? I think people are more likely to imagine themselves easily getting a speed ticket, maybe even getting a DUI, than they are to even think that that's possible. But we know it is, right? So I've got a rebuttal here by Consumer Reports down here. We'll also put in some notes from our partners at the Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety in the chat. One thing I'll say to give you a sense of how this debate is unfolding on Capitol Hill is Senator Moreno is part of the Commerce Committee that decides car safety standards. So he sent one of his staffers out to get the VIN number off of all of the cars of his Democratic counterparts on the Commerce Committee. And then he came into the committee, he said, I've done this and none of you have paid for that package. So how can you require all these cars to do that? As you can imagine, that didn't go over well. In some cases, he got it wrong. He got the VIN off of someone's staffer's car, which feels like a violation of their privacy in a way. But also some of the Democrats on that committee drive Teslas or other cars that actually do have those safety standards. So it was a big hubbub, but as you can see, like that's where the debate is right now. Really frustrating, but there is some evidence both from Consumer Reports and advocates that the price of cars based on inflation really haven't increased that much. It's that people are buying more expensive cars, it's tariffs, it's those sorts of things. So car safety standards are going to be very hard this time. We also have an administration that says for every new regulation, the government has to get rid of 10. So that if they actually choose to hold to that, that also becomes really difficult. Like, what are we going to get rid of? Seatbelts, so another really hard fight that's going to be really hard to win, but is worth the fight. And then this one I think is is good news. I know at the state and local level, there's been a lot of struggle about what's an e-bike, what's an e-moto, and when there's a crash, they say, you know, it was a 14-year-old driving an e-bike or riding an e-bike when the vehicle they were riding is something that goes to 40 miles an hour. So there's a couple of bills that we're working on with members of Congress and People for Bikes, and other folks in this space. One would require a study on micromobility safety where they would look at what type of vehicle it is, what type of infrastructure the crash happened on, what was the speed of the device, if there was a driver, if there was a vehicle, what was the speed of the vehicle. We've also asked them to break into two sections, any device that can only go 20 miles per hour or less using the engine only, using the motor only, and those that can go faster, or those that can be easily manipulated to go faster. There's also a bill we expect to be introduced soon that would have the Consumer Product Safety Commission update their definition of what an e-bike is, would require stickers on those devices, and make it illegal to refer to other vehicles as e-bikes. That's something we're still pushing, that idea of it becomes consumer fraud if you call something that isn't a bike a bike. So those are some of the things we're working on. I think we're actually, oh, I don't remember why we put Safe Streets for All in here, maybe because of the list, but that's there. Oh, actually, I'm going to older slides. So let me stop there. I'm gonna, and let's see if there's any questions.
Yes. First up, we have a question from John, asking, who do you think is behind the push to remove bike, walk / transit from the next reauth? Is it the highway industry?
So I think one, it's the administration, and I think there's two pushes from that. The president himself has said some negative things about bike lanes. I'm not sure how deep-seated it is, or if it's just things he said. The other is that the number 2 at the DOT right now is someone who comes from Heritage, and they had this language in Project 2025, and they've been pushing this since 2012. So in 2012, we had a transportation bill that passed the House Transportation Committee that made funds for biking, walking, and transit all ineligible for federal funds. We were able to push that back, mostly with the help of Republicans in suburban areas who said, like, we need transit. We want these services. Our residents want those services. It felt like when we got to 2021 and IIJA, we had taken out the partisan layer on this issue. We weren't even controversial in 2021. And so I think that's where it's coming from. And I think, I don't know, but Graves has always been good on these issues. I wonder if he's just feeling a lot of pressure from his party and from what I think of as the Trump effect of really pushing back. The other pressure they have is in the funding levels and how to keep because the Highway Trust Fund doesn't have enough money to pay for everything. But one of the foremost experts on transportation funding, who works for the Eno Center on Transportation, he has said we are long past the days where cutting biking, walking, and transit would matter to that.
Next, we have a question from Ted. What weight will be given to e-bike operator behavior along with other facts, especially considering that an 18-year-old with a driver's license can operate a 800 horsepower car?
Yeah. So the study on micromobility is mostly based on kids. So there's that piece. That's just a study. The consumer product update would update the law to the 3 class. What we've been trying to do with People for Bikes, and a lot of other groups, I know a lot of the state groups have been working on it, Ride Illinois, Hawaii, New Jersey. They're seeing a lot of pushback on those things. So we're really trying to separate out what is an e-bike by law versus what are these other things. And pushing either the state or the federal government to require that, to regulate those other vehicles as something else, and something else that doesn't belong maybe on bike infrastructure, at least at those speeds.
That ties well into our next question from Eduardo. He says, these e-bike and micromobility and e-moto bills are the hottest discussion point right now. Where can we get more information on this legislation?
The legislation isn't out yet, but when it comes out, we can share it with you. We can also give you more details on the discussion that we're having. Yeah, so I would say you can email Will or I separately. I'm going to be on vacation next week, but we can get you that info. And we can get that info out before the bills are introduced.
We have one more from John. He asks, in the future, could 504 funds be directed to advocacy groups via grants instead of to state DOTs?
Most of that money does go to, or not most of the money, most of the money goes to law enforcement, quite frankly. It goes from the state to law enforcement. A lot of states do fund advocacy groups. So look up your Governor Highway Safety Office and see if you can see when their next grant application process is, or if there's a contact person there you can reach out to about that. I will say the paperwork can be onerous depending on your state.
One final question from Phil. He asks, Washington State's e-bike law defines 3 e-bike categories. I thought this was based on a national or industry standard. Is that not the case?
Um, it was created by People for Bikes. So yeah, it was created by the industry. And I think it's over 40 states now. I want to say it's like 46 states. It's actually in US transportation law. But the consumer product definition is something about a vehicle that has 2 or 3 wheels and can't go over 20 miles per hour solely with the throttle or with the engine. And so that has been interpreted to also mean class 3, because class 3 can't go over 20 because just on the throttle, that is pedal assist.
Perfect. Then there was one last question from Paul that's a little bit more specific about the VRU special rule. So Paul, if you want to send me or Karen an email, we're happy to get back with you about that. Oh, and then, sorry, there's one more from John that just came in. Do we want legislation about e-bike and e-motos at the federal level, or is this better left to the states? Then we'll end it there.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't want bad federal legislation. And so these are not bills that I have gone out asking for or selling. These have been congressional offices that have come to us and said, like, hey, it's actually a children's safety group that had brought up the study on micromobility and trying to come up with best practices and suggested rules or laws around micromobility. So we jumped in because we didn't want them to come up with just a blanket set of proposals for all micromobility, not, including scooters and one wheels and electric skateboards and e-bikes. We didn't want all of that jumbled together, and including things that can go 40, 50 miles an hour. So that's why we were looking to stop that. On the Consumer Product Safety Commission, People for Bikes has been involved in that as well. They've been involved in all of these. Like, they've been wanting to get that 3 class into the consumer product. And one of the differences is that micromobility is seen as a device versus a vehicle. So consumer products are regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Vehicles are regulated by NHTSA. There's also requirements on vehicles that might be a little bit different. So that's sort of where the state of play is. It's basically, it's not our choice whether or not Congress is getting involved. Congress is putting themselves in the middle of it. And so our job is to make sure that they don't do anything to hurt this. The other thing I just want to mention that I guess I mentioned this before, the timing has changed. So we are now looking at a spring bill. Is that so?
Not seeing any more questions from the chat. So
All right. Well, great. Thanks, everybody. If you're not on our list already, please look to, when we send out the recording, we can send out a place to join the Bike Walk Advocacy Group, to join the league, more information about the summit. We really appreciate you being on this, and we're really going to need your help this coming year. So thanks, everybody.